The Arabs, I can't say I blame them and don't understand, were not okay with it. From their perspective, we've been existing here, albeit maybe not as a nation in the traditional sense, but we have inhabited this entire land, certainly under the auspices of the Ottoman Empire, but we have been here, and nobody's walked in and drew a line and said, okay, this is going to be someone else's state now, as you are doing, United Nations. So, as a result of that, that objection, May 14th, 1948, officially, the British mandate ended, the UN partition plan went into effect. A guy named David Ben-Gurion officially declared the existence, the reestablishment of the sovereignty of a state of Israel, as indicated in that map. And war broke out. War broke out. The first Jewish-Arab War, and it lasted until July of 1949, when basically, you basically had an uneasy ceasefire. The UN came in and pretty much negotiated, arranged an armistice, which didn't really solve anything, it just stopped the fighting. Just to show you how it really depends on your perspective as to how history is told, particularly in terms of whether you're the quote winners or losers. Jews remember this war as the Jewish War for Independence. Arabs call it in Arabic the Nakba, the disaster, because the Jewish forces actually were successful, and actually ended up with slightly more territory than the partition plan was going to give them in the first place. So compare this map. Again, the light gray areas within biblical Israel proper here, these light gray areas were going to be the Palestinian state, these white areas, the Jewish state. Compare that to what we have at the end of this, well, the UN imposed pause in this conflict. Oh, look. These darker gray areas were supposed to be part of the Palestinian state. They were captured by Israel in the 1948-49 war. And the two small areas that were going to be a part of the Palestinian state that Israel did not take, this little sliver down here that still know as the Gaza Strip, that was annexed by Egypt in 1949, and what we now know as the West Bank, this area, so-called very simply because it is on the West Bank of the Jordan River, that's why it's called that. That was annexed by the country of Jordan at the, again, pause of that conflict in 1949. So, 1949, July 1949, you do have a Jewish state even larger than what the UN was going to set up. And what you have outside of that is this little strip annexed by Egypt, and this area annexed by the country of Jordan. During that time, from 1949 up until 1967, and there's an event there I'll tell you about in just a moment. During those years, from 49 to 67, basically no Jews were allowed in Jerusalem. Because, again, Jordan, the country of Jordan, had annexed that West Bank region that Israel, the portion of Israel, did not move further in and take. Now, in the original UN partition plan, you had these two states, and Jerusalem was not really supposed to belong to either one. Jerusalem was supposed to be an internationally controlled, an international city, really. Just because of its importance to so many different groups and types of groups, the UN had the good sense to know it wouldn't be a good idea to just give it all to one state, one side, or the other. So it was supposed to be an international city. But with the annexation of the West Bank, Jordan actually claimed the majority of Jerusalem, certainly the old city that I showed you, and Jews were not allowed in the old city for those decades. So fast forward a bit to 1967, and you have what's called the 6-Day War, because that's how long it lasted, June 5th through 10, 1967. Israel knew that the military forces of Egypt and Jordan and Syria had been gathering along the borders, and what looked like a strike was coming. So Israel struck first. Israel attacked Egypt and Jordan and Syria, and won again. Got even more territory and authority still again than they had prior to that point. Israel actually then occupied the Gaza Strip, which again, up until that point, since 49, had been claimed and had been annexed by Egypt. Israel now occupied this area known as the modern West Bank that between 49 and 67 Jordan had claimed, and Israel also took control of this key area, the Golan Heights, from Syria. So the yellow that you see there is area Israel occupies after 1967. Still, of course, maintaining control and full statehood of all the gray areas there. Next major conflict is October 1973, called the Yom Kippur War, so-called because an attack was mounted against Israel on the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And in that conflict, which again was very short-lived, with help from Russia, Syria, and Egypt attacked Israel, but basically nothing changed. Israel basically held its ground and nothing changed. Now remember how I told you that late 1800s, even early 1900s, Zionism, this idea that Jews should have a homeland somewhere, was very much a secular movement, not religious at all. Really, with 1967 and forward, it begins to change flavor a bit. And here's why, or at least one big reason why. When you look at these three military conflicts, and albeit our own country has a lot to do with all three of those outcomes, with our various ways of supporting Israel and its military, even back to the 1940s. But people begin to look and say, 1948, 1967, 1973, we have nations all around jumping on us, and we're this little fledgling, newly established country, and we keep coming out on top. Maybe God's actually working this too, much like in the Exodus story and the conquering of the Promised Land. And so that, again, with 67 forward, is when you start to see religious Jews start to really get on board with Israel's statehood. And it's at that point you see a lot of the Orthodox, the Hasidic Jews start to come in from Europe. Prior to that, it was a largely secular population. But that has only continued, I would say, to this day, that now probably more than ever, the idea of Israeli statehood and of the existence of the state of Israel is really a religiously charged topic. Not just for Jews. There are Christians who I would say are, to put it very nicely, a little on the nutty side of things, who actively want to see the entire area, what's now called the West Bank, Gaza Strip, the whole shebang, become the state of Israel, and along with that, to see the Dome of the Rock shrine on the Temple Mount be destroyed, torn down, so the third and final temple can be built, so that the Messiah will return and usher in the end of time. Yes, there are Christians who believe that and contribute money to that. There is an establishment right there in the old city, within seeing distance of the Dome of the Rock, called the Temple Institute. And American Christians send money to it every year. And what the Temple Institute is doing is reading very carefully the instructions, particularly in Leviticus, for example, of the measurements and every little detail of all of the furnishings and everything that was once upon a time in the temple, the Jewish temple, and basically going ahead and getting it built and ready, so that when that dang Dome of the Rock gets blown up, they can get right to work building the third temple. I think it's kind of, and the nutty part for me is, so let me get this straight. You think that God is just kind of waiting, sitting up there just kind of doing this, waiting for us to build a building to decide when to bring about the return of the Messiah? I don't think so. Right? That's essentially what some people believe and are trying to make happen.
Still today.
Oh yes. Like I said, you can actually go to the Temple Institute in the old city today and give it a donation, and they'll say thank you very much for your contribution toward this very important world-shaping effort. Oh yes. Sometimes just Google Temple Institute and check it out.
It's in Hebrew.
No, I can assure you they've got English literature out there. The thing throughout all these years that we've talked about thus far, the 1900s up through 73, and the same thing is true today.
Do you want those pictures glued on?
The vast majority of folks living here, Jews and Muslims and Christians, let's not forget, want to try to live together and get along. And did. And do. But it's the radicals, as we see in some instances in our own country, it's the radicals who, it's everything I want or nothing, that number one, make all the news, that number two, do some of the terrible stuff that you see in the news, and then number three, make it so hard on everybody else who are fine with sharing the land. You should really talk about Googling something. Google a name, Elias Chacour, E-L-I-A-S C-H-A-C-O-U-R. And you should really get his book and read it, called Blood Brothers. He is a Melkite, well now retired, Melkite Catholic priest and archbishop of the Galilee. And he's a Christian, obviously. And his family was one of the casualties of this partition plan and some of the militaristic advances of the Israelis. His family's house and village was destroyed by Israel in the 40s. But he ended up choosing the path of the priesthood and working to foster cooperation and mutual understanding and peace, rather than the route that some take out of desperation and hopelessness, the radical terrorist route. His ministry focused on, and still does focus on, the establishment of a school in Ibilline, I-B-I-L-L-I-N. It's called Mar Elias Education Institutions. And his idea was, we got these adults going at each other. We're not going to change all their lives. We got to start with the kids and education. So his ministry was really all about education and beginning this school, which now has over 3,000 students at any given time, all the way from pre-K through college level. And the neat thing is, the students, administration, faculty, it's all a blend of Jews and Muslims and Christians. So he's got a really powerful story that he shares in Blood Brothers. And the reason he calls it Blood Brothers is because he makes that very argument. He says, we don't have to figure out how to live together. We just have to remember how we used to do it before all the politicians and loudmouths got involved, seeking to push each other completely out the door. He says, Jews, Christians, Arabs, we're all blood brothers. We just got to remember that that's the case and how we used to live that way, not discovering some ingenious plan to do so. So, of course, there have been many efforts at peace in the